Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm telling a story about an orphan boy. So let's start. The 14th story of Oliver Twist, Mr. Bumble's account of Oliver in London. Mr. Bumble left the workhouse early morning. He reached the farm where Mrs. Mann tended the infant paupers with parochial care. Mr. Bumble, after a brief conversation with the feeble child, Dick was left in shock. He was astonished to see how the feeble child expressed his love for Oliver before he died. Dick was immediately taken away and locked up in the coal cellar. At 6 o'clock next morning, Mr. Bumble sat in the coach, accompanied by the criminals whose settlement was disputed. After reaching London, Mr. Bumble ate his dinner. He drew his chair to the fire and started reading the paper. The very first news to catch his eyes was 5 guineas reward. A young boy named Oliver Twist absconded or was enticked on Thursday evening last from his home at Bentonville and has not since been heard of. The above reward will be paid to any person who will give any information that will lead to Oliver Twist or throw any light upon his previous history, in which the advertiser is for many reasons warmly interested. It was followed with a full description of Oliver's dress, appearance, and Mr. Brownlow's name and address in detail. Mr. Bumble read the advertisement carefully several times, and within 5 minutes he was on his way to Bentonville. "Is Mr. Brownlow at home?" inquired Mr. Bumble of the girl who opened the door. Mr. Bumble no sooner uttered Oliver's name than he was instantly ushered in by Mrs. Bedwin. Come in," said the old lady. "I knew we would hear of him. Poor dear, bless his heart. I said so all along." He was shown into a little back study, where sat Mr. Brownlow and his friend Grimig, with decanters and glasses before them. After Mr. Bumble sat down, Mr. Brownlow said impatiently, "Now, sir, you come in consequence of having seen the advertisement?" "Yes, sir," said Mr. Bumble. Mr. Brownlow resumed, "Do you know where this poor boy is now?" "No," replied Mr. Bumble. "Well, what do you know of him?" inquired the old gentleman. Mr. Bumble commenced his story. It was that Oliver was a foundling, born of low and vicious parents, that he had, from his birth, displayed treachery, ingratitude, and malice, and had attacked an unoffending lad and run away at night from his master's house. In proof of his really being the person he represented himself, Mr. Bumble laid upon the table the papers he had brought to town. "I fear it is all too true," said the old gentleman sorrowfully after looking over the papers. "I would gladly have given you treble the money if it had been favourable to the boy. If Mr. Bumble had known this before, he might have given a very different colour to his little history. It was too late now, so he shook his head gravely and, pocketing the 5 guineas, withdrew. Mr. Brownlow paced the room to and fro for some minutes, evidently disturbed by the beadle's tale. At length he stopped and rang the bell violently. "Mrs. Bedwin," said Mr. Brownlow, when the housekeeper appeared, "that boy Oliver is an impostor." "It can't be, sir." "It cannot be," said the old lady energetically. "I tell you he is," restored the old gentleman. "What do you mean by can't be? We have just heard a full account of him from his birth, and he has been a little villain all his life." "I never will believe it, sir," replied the old lady firmly. "Never. Let me hear the boy's name again." "You may leave the room, Mr. Bedwin," said Mr. Brownlow sadly. "There were sad hurts," said Mr. Brownlow, "that night.